I'm Courtney.
And I'm Bob,
And
and
we're
we're
attorneys.
attorneys.
And we are so excited to be here with you today on Not Just Lip Service and to have our special guest, Bob Dziewulski, with us. So, just a little bit of a backstory, and I'll let Bob introduce himself. But Bob is a part of our team in some ways. He is an outside counsel that we go to for all things from investment to just bounce ideas off of. So, we thought we'd bring him on today because he, as an attorney who still has a private practice, maybe be able to answer some questions that we get into on an in-depth level and provide some guidance and assistance to you who are watching. So, Bob, thanks for coming today.
My pleasure.
So, tell us a little bit about, of course, we all know your story, but tell us a little bit about, how you found yourself in the world of medical aesthetics, entrepreneurship for attorneys, and just your journey through being an entrepreneur and helping entrepreneurs as
Sure.
an attorney.
Yeah, so I actually went to law school a bit later in life. Prior to that, I started and grew a few companies. I got hired on some other companies that were high growth, particularly in software. But going through that process, I was involved in investment, saw the challenges that companies faced as they grew. Also did some consulting with companies. And so I've kind of seen a lot in business, and that's really the impetus for me going to law school, was to understand the legal aspects of things in greater depth than I understood them as I was going through them as an entrepreneur. And then after law school, I've worked primarily with businesses. Really, a lot of those have been in the medical field. And then, as you were getting more involved in medical aesthetics, I ended up having greater interest in it, and now, both from medical aesthetics and medical practices, advise several clients as they navigate compliance issues and their own growth.
Yeah, so like the medical, just from knowing Bob, the medical aesthetic space, especially for entrepreneurs, is like your sweet spot because you both have the drive and the inventiveness of entrepreneurship, but then the medical aesthetic space is such a gray area that as an attorney, it's incredibly challenging but fulfilling because it's not always like an easy answer. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I know that you feel that way. I definitely feel that way, that it's really intellectually stimulating on a day-to-day basis, and then to be surrounded by entrepreneurs, it fuels you in a different way because they're so excited.
Yeah.
So as you know, we have a Patreon account where we put in, and you all know this too, we put up educational information about compliance issues and business aspects, and of course Mary does the clinical side. And we're able to touch on some things pretty shallow because of course we have to really be careful about teetering on the line of as a spa, we can't be giving legal advice, but we do some really good foundational level at our training courses. We have a business hour. So people who are listening have had a couple opportunities to get some foundational stuff about starting an LLC if that's what they want to do. So we've got like the basics out there, but I really want to dig into a few topics today. I think that you have a particular great insight into. So we'll just dive right in if that's good for you.
That'd be great.
I think the first thing is, sometimes if you want to start a business, you have a partner that you want to start a business with. What are some ideas and ways that you've seen this done where you can protect yourself? So say you and I are going to go into business together and we both are so into it at the beginning, and then we get halfway through and you never show up to work. Like, how do we protect ourselves from that? Because of course, in a perfect world, you'd have tons of money and you'd hire an attorney and you'd know all the questions to ask on the front end and you get all of those things shored up. But more often than not, the questions come as you go through.
Yeah, I think it's a challenge that I've seen a lot. And I've actually also seen plenty of businesses and med spas where a 50-50 partnership's working. Honestly, I think it's usually better if there's somebody who's kind of, going to end up being the manager, somebody with a slightly more equity. I think it solves a lot of problems. And one of the other things that you can do in that situation, and I kind of advise this with most of my business clients, is to set a method to value the company that incentivizes work. So, for example, you could even make it time constrained. Generally, hopefully, you would know within maybe a year and a half, 2 years, if somebody's not going to pan out. And so you can set the valuation method for an exit extremely low, so it's easier for the active member to buy out the maybe inactive member, the one that doesn't show up to work. So I mean, those are some methods, and obviously, if I think somebody is interested in getting involved in the business, my recommendation in a lot of cases is to just go ahead and start, and then see if everybody else is going to join in. I mean, it's not uncommon for businesses, and I see it quite often, even where everybody's enthusiastic at the beginning, those initial documents, those initial governing documents end up being so important as they move forward. So I kind of recommend the leading entrepreneur, go ahead and start and move forward, and then see who is actually committed after you've taken those initial steps.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. And so just for an example, make sure I understand you correctly, if you are going into a partnership with someone, you could come up with an agreement that says essentially what we call like a first right of refusal, that you say if, and this is, correct me if I'm wrong from what I understand what you said, that if we want to buy you out within the first year, we agree to a valuation of $100,000, and we have a first right to buy out your 50% at $100,000 if within the first year. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, there's potentially some other mechanisms to do that. I mean, so if somebody, you can set some expectations for partners, and there's a variety of ways that you can do that, and say, if you fall short of that, or if there's sort of disagreement or impasse, then it can be a triggering event for to terminate a member or something like that, and there's going to be a set valuation of, let's say, $100,000. So people aren't necessarily, if there's somebody who's just kind of there for the ride and not participating, they don't benefit from the hard work of the other person necessarily. So it's a good method to do that.
Yeah, I mean, because going into business with someone, you had mentioned at first having a third person, and we hear that a lot, and I think that we were intentional about that in some ways, with it being, me marrying Carla for a variety of reasons, but I don't think even at the onset that we understood how beneficial that would be of having that third person. Mm-hmm. And that third person, I think on the face you would think that it was me, but sometimes it is, me and Carla discussing something with Mary. It creates that dynamic where we can all have conversations, and whoever is the third changes as the
yeah,
the waters move.
And I think particularly in the medical world or medical aesthetics world, I think there's a lot of value in if for example, and I see this probably more often where it's two advanced practice nurses coming together to start their business. If they do have a third person who may even have a similar background but a different kind of expertise, maybe they do have more insight into accounting or business operations or human resources, to have somebody that maybe isn't necessarily one-to-one with the other partners in terms of their skill set, I think is often really valuable as well.
Yeah, because I mean, it's, for lack of a better comparison, going into business with someone is a lot like getting married, which means getting out of business with someone is a lot like getting a divorce, and it can get hairy. Especially as the business grows and as you all become more successful, it just becomes like a more challenging divorce in that situation. So it's definitely not something to take lightly to go into business with someone, and everyone's doing themselves a favor if they think about these things as much. And staying with that comparison, I'm sure that we've all heard like the honeymoon phase of a relationship where everything is grand and everything is perfect. That is kind of similar to when two people are really excited and they want to start a business together. Yeah. They can't really see a year ahead to think about, what's going to happen if this doesn't go exactly as planned.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's why having good counsel is really valuable. And I think it's like you were saying, as a company grows and the stakes increase, the likelihood of conflict being more drawn out or people putting more money behind that conflict is higher. And I think particularly in the medical aesthetics world where, it seems like there's going to be a lot of consolidation and buyouts coming down the pike, so the valuations are likely to start to increase. And if that's a good example, whether or not to sell can be a huge conflict point for partners. So making sure that you
come at an impasse because
yeah.
one person wants to sell and the other one person doesn't. And then, so walk us through what would happen in that situation if you didn't think about it at the front and you didn't get a third person, even if a third person with just a vote.
Yeah.
But if you didn't think about that, like what would happen?
So I mean, I think if you're 50-50 and there's no mechanism within your governing documents to address that 50-50 conflict, which is pretty common. I mean, I see it fairly often where people have just pulled operating agreements off the internet, and it just doesn't really address a lot of the things that probably need to be addressed in those situations. So when that happens, you're likely to have to get a judge to make a decision. So a chancery judge is going to say, okay, well, we've looked at it. This is in the best interest of the company, arguably. Or, there are situations where the judge just has to say, okay, a company's going to be dissolved and we're going to split up assets and you guys can go on your...
So that means a lawsuit.
Yeah.
Someone's going to file an injunction, right?
Yep, yeah. So there's absolutely a loss. That'd be a lawsuit. On the other hand, there are things you can do on the front end to anticipate those types of conflicts, particularly where there's a buyout or addition of a new member or something like that. There are things that you can do on the front end and agree to, and I think that's also important to kind of, as you start building your company, thinking about what the future might look like is really important. So whether or not you include those types of terms within your operating agreement or whatever really has to do with what you want to do in the future. So for example, if you are starting your company and you say, I really love injecting and interacting with patients and I want to do that forever. I never want to sell to anyone else. I just like being my own boss. You're going to take a different approach in terms of your governing documents than you would if you say, hey, in 3 years, I'd like to be acquired, or in 5 years, I'd like to have acquired and then be acquired. I mean, I think both of those are very different in terms of what you do on the front end and how you structure your governing agreements.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many different avenues, and that's one of the things that we discuss as a team often is with this space being so new in so many ways, we could just go a million different directions, but really sticking to what the direction we want to go, which doesn't mean it's the more correct. It's just a decision that we make. So talk about what you see as a practitioner who's helping med spas. What are some of the opportunities? What are some of the directions that some people can take? What's exciting you? And as people create their business plan and their ideas, where could they go?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that it's interesting. Throughout the world of medicine, there's been a lot of consolidation. So big companies are coming up and buying small companies. There's a lot of private equity money, investment banks that are coming in and facilitating those types of deals. And it hasn't really touched medical aesthetics in the same way as it has others. So if you look in the last decade, was just an enormous consolidation in the world of the dental world. And moving forward, that's likely to be the case for medical aesthetics. So I mean, it's absolutely happening more and more. If you look at the comparison to dental, we maybe are in the very early stages of that. But in 2019, there was huge money in the dental world just trying to consolidate, and there are fewer and fewer little guys in the dental world now.
Dental one we've got.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd say even in most cities, if you look at the dental practices, they're going to end up being part of a group, even if they kind of appear that they're not. And so I think
that a big group will buy out a med spa, but they allow the med spa to still be branded as so it appears for outward facing to be still the local owned.
Yeah, and there's a ton of ways that those buyouts can work, but this space, I mean, a very high percentage, I believe it's over 60% of med spas are still owned by individuals, and I'd say in the next 3 to 5 years that's going to be dramatically different because there is money being pumped into it, and there's a really high potential for a lucrative exit for people who are getting into the space.
So if you are looking at being acquired, if that's your goal, I'm going to start a med spa, I'm going to grow it, I want to be acquired, um, I need to have an attorney, all of that sounds very expensive. So I think there are a lot of ways to get money. So talk to us about how you help clients navigate getting money to buy equipment, getting money to get legal fees taken care of, and how can we get this money to grow this business?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, just depending on the person or people that I'm working with, as they start it, it's, you know, some people are coming with their own money that they've saved up, and that can be a really good approach. Others are relying on friends or family to put money in, and there are ways, and I know that Smiley has some pathways so people can start with very low overhead. But if you're starting something on your own, there's going to be some overhead, and in different states there are different requirements in terms of equity investment. But there are a lot of ways that you can provide profits, interests, and stuff like that outside of equity investment. And so, having an attorney set that stuff up, it's pretty good and important. And if you're looking toward an exit, I think the best thing that you can do is have a savvy attorney and savvy accountant that are helping you guide you through
So
those
hard.
things.
The accountant, I feel like, is a piece that is still, like shout out to the accountants out there. If someone really wants to specialize in the med spa world, it is needed.
Yes, without a doubt. I think that that a good accountant can go a really long way. But back to raising the money. So you could use equity investment. You could also say, okay, our equipment. There's a lot of value in that equipment. You can do that through traditional lending potentially. You can do purchase money lending from the seller of the equipment. Or if you're going to raise private money, you could even put that equipment in a separate LLC. So those individuals that are making an investment are getting a return from the equipment, not necessarily from the provision of care.
Sure.
Which, in different states, there are different requirements, but in many states, you're unable to take equity investment in your practice from a non-medical professional. So.
Yeah, because of the corporate practice of medicine. But you are right that in a lot of states, you can, non-medical professionals can own the medical equipment, or they
Yep.
can't own a stake in that. So just because someone, a family member or a friend is wanting to help you along in your business journey, and they say, we have $50,000 we would like to invest in your business, that means we get 40% of your company. What we're kind of getting at is that doesn't have to be the case.
No, it doesn't have to be the case, and I think there are often a lot of better ways. And I think something to keep in mind too is you start your company and you think about equity. So often people are thinking about it as the positive. So you see, Facebook buyouts and stuff like that. But when you are an equity holder, you also have certain duties, responsibilities, and sometimes you're going to have responsibilities for liabilities that the company takes on. So I think that's something to also be aware of. And so if you're raising money from a family member, and they say, well, I want to have 40% of your company, it really may be a better opportunity for them to have some sort of profit share that's contractual rather than pure equity.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a good point. Even if you are looking at investing in another company, 40% of the company means 40% of the liability. You own 40% of not just the good.
Yeah.
You own 40% of everything. And so I think like you said, it's so often viewed as a positive, but it's a really important decision that we make when we look at going into a space and partnering with a new med spa and a new partnership is have a full understanding of you take the good and the bad. So if the partnership doesn't feel right, then it's not a good decision.
Yeah, and I think to touch on the equipment stuff too. There's a world where if things don't go right and you've put your equipment into another entity and they have ownership in that entity, they're protected in a different way because you can liquidate and sell the equipment
Sure.
in order to recover some of that investment. Versus if they own a portion of the entity as a whole, there's going to be likely additional liabilities, and those liabilities, they may end up being second lien holders and that sort of thing that they'd have a harder time recovering if things go bad.
Yeah, and to take it out of the business context, it seems like a fair comparison would be if you have 5 people who are pulling together to help you buy this big luxury car, and they're all listed as a lien holder on the title. If all of a sudden you decide you don't want that car anymore and it's not working out, they all are lien holders on the title, and so the process would be to sell that vehicle and distribute funds. So
Yep.
Pulling those funds together and buying equipment, they would then have rights in the equipment that you could sell if things just went awry.
Yep.
And there is a market out there for reselling things like lasers and all that. Well, I think we run into this question a lot. I know that you have some creative ways of helping people, because as what we are trying to do on Patreon and what we are trying to do for, distilling some of the barriers to entry and breaking those down for medical aesthetics professionals, specifically for nurses, and laying the groundwork. There's only, like you said, there's only so much that we can do, and then it gets to a point where it is, you need an attorney and we can't be your attorney. But that is so expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you have some creative ways. So, and I know that you probably are not the only attorney who has some creative ways. So give the people who are listening some ideas to propose if they are going to have a conversation with an attorney.
Yeah, I think the goal would probably be to get into a longer term relationship. Certainly if you go to an attorney and say, hey, I just need this contract, you're likely going to be paying a bit more. And if you are able to use an attorney that has a background in medical aesthetics or even in medical, you're going to be way ahead, because I'm sure you've discussed previously, there are a lot of gray areas here. There are a lot of compliance issues that even a traditional medical practice is not going to have. And there are some things that, because it's private pay, you don't have to deal with that you would with another medical practice. So I think it'd be really good if you're able to get somebody with some insight and expertise, because they don't have to learn it over and over again, or relearn things specific to...
And learn your business.
Yeah. And so, if you could get into a longer term relationship where they're able to provide, governing documents, employment documents, but also it's not uncommon. I mean, just yesterday I had a call with a client that was asking a question, and it's no big deal to call on my cell phone and not necessarily have to go through the office and operator and those sorts of things. I find it, particularly with medical aesthetics, that those calls are needed because there's so much gray area. And as you grow, as your company grows, your needs are different. So in this situation, there's the client had a independent contractor agreement, which was really good as they were trying to kind of get their feet planted and get those initial appointments and so on. But now they have they're really booked. There's no issue in terms of booking, and they probably need to revisit what their independent contractor agreement looks like, and also whether or not those employees go to W-2. Mm-hmm. And those are kind of hard things to navigate on your own as a business owner, both from having the knowledge, but even if you have the knowledge, just to be able to take a step back at times and say, wait, my business has changed. I'm in a different position than I was before. So I would say that having sort of a longer term relationship, I know that we, and I'm sure other attorneys will enter into monthly agreements. So you say, well, this is going to cost $10,000 for all of these agreements, let's say. But can be paid over the course of 6 months instead of all at once. So it's not such an impact on your initial cash flow, and not an impediment to getting started.
Yeah, and you just had a really great point of, I think so often people think that attorneys just draft documents, and that is certainly part of it, but that conversation that you had about whether it's time to switch from an independent contractor 1099 to a W-2, that is an analysis. And so, yeah, there's an agreement in place for an independent contractor, and there's an agreement in place for an employee, but making that decision and whether it's the right move and whether it's the most beneficial move for your business at the time, that is a legal analysis.
Yeah.
And so the difference could be, an independent practice just making that decision. It's time. and they then contact their attorney and say, draft me an employment agreement. But the attorney is not involved in any way in helping navigate and guide through the things that you need to consider when making that decision.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's a completely different relationship. And I
Yeah.
think that you would say that having that relationship and having that guidance is the bulk of it. The drafting documents is certainly the legal component of it, but that analysis is a huge part of the job of an attorney.
Yeah, yeah, and again, just kind of bring it back to attorneys that have that insight. I mean, for example, I have an alert, so I get all semi-glutide articles that Google finds, because there's a lot of movement in the country in terms of what's allowed there, and so if you have somebody who is already addressing those problems or potential problems in the industry and in the specific market, I think you really are ahead, because they don't have to start that research from scratch with you if they work with a number of clients within the industry.
I mean, a med spa attorney, though, is few and far between. I think that we both are uniquely positioned to know the gray areas, and we've really dedicated a lot of time to being knowledgeable in the area. But I hope that you, listening to this, get some ideas. I know as Smiley Aesthetics as a whole, we've been able to provide an opportunity for people to enter this area of the world and in medical aesthetics with low cost, low barrier to entries, and the legal component really is an issue. It is a huge barrier, and so if you get nothing else, I hope that you, from this, that you hear what Bob is saying, and that his practice is also working to form relationships with clients, to break down those barriers to entry, so you don't have these astronomical $10,000, $20,000 upfront payments, which we see a lot in the legal world. We had a conversation this past week where someone said, "Yeah, but it's a $20,000 retainer." Like, people just don't have that type of money sitting around. So practices are being creative and helping people spread that out over a course, so they can get started in the right way, that they can do the things that they need to do, but they can make it not cost prohibitive to being able to be compliant.
Yeah, and I think the right relationship. I mean, your attorneys or accountants are also going to be committed to your success.
Yeah.
And I think it becomes a little bit less transactional as you're starting a business, to have somebody who really wants you to succeed. So, I mean, the relationship can continue and grow.
Okay, Bob, so close us out. Tell us something that's going on in the med spa space that as an entrepreneur and as an attorney and as somebody who works with clients, that you are really excited about.
I mean, definitely consolidation that I mentioned earlier. I think that there's going to be just so much opportunity within the space to grow quickly. I think, with the right relationships, med spas are going to be able to really take a different trajectory and have more opportunity than they have right now. I think, we're kind of early I mentioned semaglutide. I mean, we're kind of early there. I think that it looks like there's a lot of opportunity coming down the pike for a variety of different treatments. So I think that there's going to be, I think that's also a huge opportunity. Those med spas that are being really forward-thinking with that are going to have a lot of opportunity as new treatments are developed.
Yeah, you mentioned something to me yesterday that I do want to point out, because it is so true, that as more money comes into this space, more regulation will come into this space.
Absolutely.
1,000%.
Yeah.
So getting ahead of that, which of course is what we are trying to do as a company, is putting as much information out as we can to help people be compliant, or to give them the knowledge to be compliant. But as more money pours in, it will have more attention. There will be more regulation. So getting ahead of that is crucial to your business.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and I think those that do that are going to thrive. So.
Yeah, and I know that you have a network of attorneys that you work with, and so are you, I mean, I don't know what your client load looks like. Are you available to be a resource if someone, you might not be able to help, but you might be able to push them in the right direction, or you might be able to help? Is that something that your firm is
Yeah,
considering?
we're definitely open to new relationships, and we work with a number of clients there may be a limit to that,
Sure.
but we are definitely open to that. Yeah.
Joe, tell people how they can find you.
Yeah. So it's DZ Law. That's dzlaw.co, based out of Knoxville, and phone number is 865-259-0020.
And good luck trying to spell Bob Dziewulski's last name.
Yeah, it's DZIEWULSKI.
Yeah. Well, Bob, thanks so much for coming today. I think this has been great and really giving people, if nothing else, the right questions to ask on the front end as they think about their business. And I know something that you say all the time, that being proactive is so much better than being reactive.
And way less expensive.
And way less expensive, which is true. So spend some money on the front end to save yourself on the back end.
Absolutely.
But thanks for coming today.
Thank you.